All right, well, I'm the Halitics. A little bit of a late start this morning. Sorry about that, but I guess it doesn't matter since most everybody does watch the replay. And I would prefer you watch live because I want to talk to you. I think that's the whole. I don't know that that's the whole, but that's the ideal, right? This is a community where we are chatting with each other, where we are reaching some kind of hopefully a consensus about what's happening in our world and how we can improve things, how we can make things just a little bit better. And my gosh, we need to do that, don't we? Things are as bad perhaps as they've ever been. Maybe not for the average person in this moment, but our future is grim. It truly is. And sorry to depress you. Sorry to bum you. I know that probably tamps down my audience, right? Because I do provide you with villains. I do absolutely blame people, but I also don't always give you as much hope and optimism as you would like. I've been harshly critical of Jimmy because I think he plays a game where he criticizes elites correctly on many, many occasions, but he also, to a degree, downplays just how serious crises are, which, look, if you're a drowning person, you're going to grasp at anything, including a straw, including sometimes a life preserver that's filled with concrete. You just might, you don't know what the heck you're doing. You just want any solution possible, no matter how preposterous or ultimately unsatisfactory it may prove to be. And I think we're seeing that also with the support for the Ukraine war, to the extent so many Democrats support this horrible war. They're thinking, oh my gosh, things are so bad, so unstable in this world. We've got to have someone to blame. If only we can just defeat that Putin, maybe things will get better. And no, that's not the answer. The answer is we really have to wrest power and money from the plutocratic elites. All right, let's talk about one real quick here. Elon Musk. Now, full disclosure, I have a Tesla. I actually have two, I must admit. Those are our two cars. We needed two cars. We have two. We love them. I do. I think they're an amazing car. People say, well, how can you buy something from Musk? I'm buying a car, okay? Whoever I buy the car from, there's going to be issues. Nobody's, we're all complicit. My solution is, again, much higher taxes on Musk and all the billionaires, and take away a lot of their power as well politically, which we would be able to do, of course, which we would be doing if we tax them. But yeah, it's a great car. Now, I don't get that. Now, he owns Twitter, right? But now it's called X, right? You can see that. Now, I don't get that. Here's why. The URL remains Twitter, right? You don't go to x.com. I mean, you see the little X there in the top left corner of my screen share. But why are you going to remember? Are you going to say, I'm going to X somebody? And in fact, if you look, and I'm going to just scroll up this a little bit, I had to make it bigger, but if you look up at the, or if you look down, I guess, at the bottom of the screen, you're not Xing people, you're tweeting them, right? So again, I'm really confused. You're going to call it X, but you still go to twitter.com. I assume they'll change the name of the app, right? I mean, I guess most people do this on their device, their phone. I mean, this is a device too, a laptop, or this is my PC, right? So there you go. You can see it. This is what I tweeted out this morning for today's program. I tweeted it out. I didn't X it out. I think that'd be confusing too, right? Because when you X something, usually you delete it. You don't share it. So it's kind of weird to me that he's calling this X. I know Musk apparently famously loves the letters, right? So the Teslas, he's got the S, he's got the 3, he's got the X. I don't know, is there a Y? I think there is a Y, right? Is there a Y? I'm not sure. There's the Plaid. Maybe the Y is the... No, I don't think the Y is the SUV. That's sort of the X, which is kind of a weird looking humpback kind of thing. But apparently very selling really well for Musk. So he famously, the S and then the 3 is like an E. So it's the S, the 3, or E, the X, and then was there a Y? I don't know. So it's like sexy. Like that was his big thing. That's his like contribution. But now he's also calling Twitter X. And again, are you going to act? You're not going to. You're going to tweet. You're going to tweet, and twit. You know, it's the URL is Twitter. So I don't really get this. We'll be following on this. You know, I was talking to someone about social media yesterday at a lunch, and they were very critical. They're like, it's so stupid. I can't stand it. I don't do it. And I was thinking, well, I do it, right? And part of it, and my excuse was, well, I do it to promote my live stream, which, by the way, is Halitics. You can see the square in the bottom right, the blue and white square. Click subscribe if you haven't yet. I need all the subscribers I can get and more. So please click subscribe. You know anybody who might be interested, tell them to subscribe. Don't cost nothing. Not going to set you back anything. And who knows, maybe even if you're determined never to watch Halitics again, maybe you'll see on your social media feed at some point a little promo for me for my program that suddenly gets you a little bit excited, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll try him again. Maybe he'll be a little better. Maybe the audio will sound better. Maybe I'll have a better guest, what have you. Anyway, subscribe. That helps me out. That's all I'm asking, and ultimately, I hope that helps you out. So today's program, Uncharted Waters, more door, and obviously starting with the Twitter discussion here. If you want to join me, it's 240-363-7190. I think if I want calls, I have to start my program at like 10 a.m. Eastern so that John can join me from Salinas. Well, it's really, I think, Seaside. I'm not sure. Somewhere in that part of the peninsula. Because he's the only one who's calling. No one else is. And I got some nice love. People saying, they like this or they don't like that. Spoke to a guy yesterday who told me he thinks this is a great live stream, loves my demeanor, the way I do it. But I'm like, well, how do we make this thing bigger? And he didn't really have an answer. And I guess the answer to that is we don't. Nobody knows, right? If you had a solution, if you had the magic touch, if you knew how to make a successful program, period, you would do it. I think you would. Now, obviously, part of it is talent. We all have our different skill sets. So, you may have an idea how to make someone else's program more successful, whereas you couldn't really implement it yourself for your own program. Who knows? But I do think this is good. I think it's worth watching. I think it's worth listening to. I think I provide a service, so I hope you do too. I hope you'll continue to tune in. All right, let's start with the climate crisis. And this does follow. This follows what I discussed yesterday about Dorr and why I really have a huge problem with his program, because he is taking on the climate crisis. He has become a denier. He has claimed, now he seems to be claiming, or he does, he platformed an absurd view that the temperatures in Europe really aren't in the mid to upper 40s Celsius, which, if you do the math, is well over, 110. I think 40 degrees Celsius is 872 is 104. And basically every degree Celsius is 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So Celsius is a little less precise, but they sometimes use 0.5 too, so that kind of gets you into the same realm as half a degree Celsius is approximately slightly less than than a full degree Fahrenheit. There's no change in the measurements. The European temperatures are at records that we haven't seen possibly in 100,000 years. There's no question about that. The air temperature is the dominant form of measurement. That is where they're getting the upper 40s, 2 meters in the air, not on the ground as a denier claimed and whom Dorr platformed. And, he gets hundreds of thousands of views for that. And it's very unfortunate. It's very dangerous. I'm trying to I am being the antidote to those lies. That said, Jimmy does still perform a valuable service when it comes to calling out the corruption in the duopoly. I appreciate that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's focus now on just how awful, how cataclysmic, how destructive humans are when it comes to this planet. By the way, ABC News
Sea ice
Australia.
around Antarctica is constantly transforming. In summer, it melts. In winter, it builds back up again. Scientists describe the process as the Earth's beating heart, one of the largest seasonal cycles on the planet. But the system is failing, and experts say we're now in uncharted waters. Let's go through the graph that has scientists so worried. The straight line is the average sea ice extent around Antarctica through the year. And here's 2016. Something went wrong that year. There was much less sea ice around than usual. 2017 and 2022 also experienced all-time lows in summer. Sea ice has usually bounced back in winter somewhat, but this year it hasn't. Instead, it's falling off a cliff. To put it another way, this is how much sea ice is usually around in mid-July, and this is how much was around this year. Is it a one?
Okay, so I stopped it right there because I want you to see how there's a very significant drop in the total amount of sea ice in terms of the surface amount. And basically what you're seeing is, and although it's not a perfect circle, there is pretty much a circle around the South Pole, and the circumference of that circle, the radius of the circle, use whatever term you want, the diameter is shrinking, is getting smaller. Now, this is obviously very problematic, but it really understates the seriousness of the problem, because one of the claims that was made, that deniers have made, is, how can there be global catastrophe? How can there be a cataclysm? How can there even be global warming if, in fact, the sea ice is not melting? Because one of the kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a paradox, or one of the phenomenon that we observed is, while the Arctic surface ice area and the total sea ice area was shrinking very rapidly in the past 25 years, till we now have a Arctic, we have a ice-free Arctic practically in the summer, and we're going to have an ice-free Arctic in summers very, very soon. That is a massive change. So basically, the sea ice in the Arctic is almost all, the permanent ice, the glacier, if you will, is almost all gone. But that same phenomenon of ever diminishing surface ice was not observed in Antarctica until recently. Until recently, scientists had noticed that the surface ice, not the total amount of sea ice, because the depth of the ice was shrinking. In other words, it didn't go nearly as far down into the Antarctic Ocean or the Southern Ocean. In recent years, it was melting from underneath. But in wintertime, the extent of that ice was actually growing on the top of the ocean, not underneath. So you were not seeing a major drop or a major diminishment in the amount of surface ice. Now we are seeing that diminishment. Now we are seeing that obviously the amount of total sea ice, the amount of ice in the ocean, has been dropping and continues to drop at an accelerating rate. But now we're also seeing the extent of the ice in terms of the surface, in terms of the distance from the South Pole, is drastically shrinking, is getting much, much smaller, and at a unprecedented rate, at something that we haven't ever seen before. Let me see if I can go back and just show that chart. So again, here's the chart, and you can see the zero represents how much sea ice there was when, at a normal, an average year. And between 2017 and 2022, you tended to see in the summer months, okay, so that's in the southern hemisphere, that would be the winter time, right? So you'd see as December approached, or you would see the surface ice level start to approach zero. As I indicated, you were not seeing a large diminishment of surface ice in the summer, and then it would, it would start to come back. And you could see in 2017, it would start to come back after December as the summer came around. But there was a period, there would be a season when the sea ice level started to come back, when the sea ice level would come back up quite a bit. And as you watch the video, you'll see that we no longer have that.
But this year, it hasn't. Instead, it's falling off a cliff.
So you can see in the summer now, we're not seeing any rebound, right? So January and December, summer here, winter there, you're not seeing any rebound. In our months, when it's supposed to be colder down there and you're supposed to see the sea ice level start to grow back, they're not. They're getting lower and lower, the amount of ice.
Put it another way, this is how much sea ice is usually around in mid-July, and this is how much was around this year. Is it a one-off, or is it the new normal as the climate warms?
There are people saying this could be natural variability. Absolutely, we can't conclusively rule it out yet, but it's very unlikely. We know that this is what the world is going to look like as it warms. It may be that next winter it'll come back. We can hope. I don't know that it will.
All right, so you hear what that scientist says. Clearly he is pessimistic. And scientists have been consistently optimistic. They've consistently understated the seriousness of this problem. Temperatures have been rising at a level that is greater than what scientists predict. The Arctic is going to be ice-free sooner. Predictions were 2040 to 2050, just 10, 15 years ago. Now we're looking at by 2030, if not sooner. So that scientist's guarded hope, I wouldn't count on it. So I want to point out something else about this. This is, and one of my, I'm going to call him a fan. Anyone who watches my shows, anyone who takes the time to comment on what I say is a fan. I don't care how negative they are, how critical they are. If they're going to spend their valuable moments watching anything I do, I appreciate that. I thank you. And if you're going to comment, I don't care how harsh it is towards me, I'm pretty much going to leave it up. I mean, if it's some sort of just mean-spirited insult, no, I'll take that down. But otherwise, say what you want about me. If you criticize other people, I probably will take it down from my social media feeds. I don't like it when other people get berated. No, especially if they're not famous. But the criticism of my program yesterday was that I say Jimmy Dore's not a scientist, and he's not relying on scientists for his claims that global warming isn't really happening in Europe. So don't believe him. And the response is, well, you're not a scientist either, so who are you to be telling us? And my answer is, I'm relying on hard data. I'm relying on the specifics. Dore said something that, frankly wasn't true. He said that the temperature readings in Europe are now based on the actual surface temperature on the ground, which it is hotter than 2 meters in the air. That's just false. That was a false statement. That was incorrect. The temperatures records being broken in Europe are being broken based on readings at 2 meters, not on the ground. So Dor said something that was false, and that is in fact hard data. That's factual. That's something we know, we can measure. Now maybe that's the website that said that, where those temperatures were allegedly taken, that we're basing our readings that conclude that Europe is at record heat levels. Maybe that website is lying, but then where's the date? Where's the evidence? Who's going to come forward who has knowledge and say, yeah, we fudge the numbers or we change our measurement system? I mean, until you do that, you're full of crap, bottom line. And we're also, the sea ice level, that is hard data. That is based on actual observations, aerial photographs, ships that go down there and measure where the ice starts at what times of year. That is not anecdotal. That is not, oh, it felt really hot today. Or hey, it hasn't gotten warmer on the Central Coast. It's raining right now, so it's a hoax. So this is hard data. That is what I'm basing it on. If I'm wrong, present the data that says I'm wrong, or explain why my logic is false. Otherwise, go ahead, criticize away, but you're just proving you don't know what you're talking about. Dor says we're not really seeing record temperatures. Okay, maybe Europe isn't. Explain why the ice levels in Antarctica are so low then. Why, as we're in actual Antarctic winter, when the surface ice levels generally tend to grow and not be significantly below normal, why did they just plunge to their lowest level? Why are the penguins dying? I don't understand, Dor. Sure, maybe they've changed the measurements in Europe, but how would that create, if we're not really seeing a much hotter planet, way beyond what scientists predicted we would see at this time, if we're not seeing that, why are we seeing all this ice melting? You want to try to explain that one?
So why should we care about sea ice? Well, it's key in regulating the Earth's temperature. It reflects the sun's heat back into space, keeping the sea underneath cool, and the annual cycle of freeze and melt drives global currents that transport nutrient-rich water into the rest of the ocean, feeding ecosystems. The ice is also a habitat for animals like seals and penguins. The thing is, scientists are still unsure about what's driving this trend. Is it a change in the atmosphere, the ocean's temperature, or both? Either way, there are fears a further change in the balance could trigger a tipping point, and after that, it's difficult to reverse the direction.
And that would be quite concerning to the comfort and the sustainability of human conditions on Earth, I suspect.
This is a rare event, an event for once every 7.5 million years. It's something...
All right, let me stop it there. So very, trying to be very responsible. The anchor there, this is ABC News Australia. She doesn't want to say this is definitely the climate catastrophe writ large. But is there really any doubt? You heard what the scientist earlier said. This is consistent with everything we predicted would happen. And you just heard, this is what they call a sigma event. It's 5, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, sigma. There you go. So sigma is the 5th letter of the Greek alphabet. It's 5, the statistics, I can't remember. There's degrees. There's 5, I don't know what the hell. But whatever that is, the likelihood of this happening on a random basis without rapid temperature increases on Earth, deviations, as they call it. I don't really understand how 5 standard deviations would only occur every 7.5 million years. I believe 1 standard deviation means you're in the top 5%, right? So maybe it's 95 or 0.95 to the 0.05 to the 5th, something like that. I don't really know. But it's Jeff, I'm sure, understands this much better than I do. But in any event, what they're saying is that this kind of sigma event, 5 standard deviations from normal, will likely occur randomly every 7.5 million years, longer than humans have been on the planet. So or humanoids, yes, I guess that's right. We don't know for absolute certainty that this is human action that's causing this, that it's our burning fossil fuels. We don't know that to an absolute certainty, but I'll tell you what, anyone in court who presents a defense that scientifically shows that the odds are 1 out of 7.5 million that they're innocent, and that the other 7.49999 million times they were guilty, they'd be convicted. This is way, way, way past beyond a reasonable doubt. It is way, way past a reasonable doubt that we are melting the entire planet and totally changing our environment and creating the 6th mass extinction and watching beautiful species be extinguished. And it's all that we're doing, and we're putting cities underwater, and millions of people are being are climate refugees, and millions are dying, and many, many, many more will, unless we take immediate action. And even if we take immediate action, it will still happen.
Scientists are now watching with interest.
All right, so there you go. That was quite an interesting video, and I've got those penguins up there I want to show you. Just specifically what's happening, the victims. And, I don't know, some people care about animals. I care a lot. Others seem to be less concerned. This is from a year ago. Emperor penguin at serious risk of extinction. So those cute penguin movies, and you see the penguin, and they're so loyal. You see there's the dad and the mom, and I think the dad is the one with the beak pointing straight down at the little chick's head, because they sometimes the chicks will stand on their dad's feet, sometimes on the mom's. One of them goes out and hunts for fish. So it's a very evolved species. It's a very specialized animal that has, over millions of years, become remarkably adept at surviving in the coldest place on the planet. And as the coldest place on the planet warms up, they can no longer survive. So emperor penguins require solid sea ice through the Antarctic winter in order to raise chicks. And we're seeing right now they're not getting it. Even the Antarctic winter no longer will provide that solid sea ice that those chicks need to survive. And I know some of you don't care, right? Or you're going to say, well, I care a little bit about the penguin, but I care more about my own survival. It's a web of life. You tear at one, you pull one little thread out, and the garment's probably okay. But when you start pulling out lots and lots of threads, and bigger and fatter threads, and you keep pulling at them, and you never let the clothing manufacturer, the weaver, the knitter start to repair the rents, well, then pretty soon you got nothing. You got nothing to wear. You got nothing to eat. You just have a dead planet. And that's exactly where we're headed. Just want to do a little more on these penguins. And I want to get to where Jimmy got something right. And he got it very right. And this is why we'll not throw, I'll criticize him very much, but he still provides value. What saddens me is his programs in which he debunks the climate catastrophe get huge amounts of viewership and very little pushback from you. But when he criticizes the Democrats, in fact, I was talking about this with somebody yesterday who was like, I said, hey, I'm perfectly willing to criticize Jimmy when he's wrong. So therefore, you need to be willing to accept when I say Jimmy's right, that he may well be right. And the response is always wrong. You just won't see it. You just can't see it. I don't know what you do with that. I don't know how to deal with that. And I said, well, he's right about force the vote. And so the person to whom I'm speaking didn't quite deny that Jim was always wrong. He just said, well, his motives are always bad. He's always motivated for himself. And again, okay, well, maybe that's true. I don't think it is, but maybe. But then this person starts going after Dorff for criticizing the big pharma. And I said, well, if you're talking about motives, who has worse motives than big pharma? Sure, maybe now and then they come up with a cure for a disease, but what they're motivated by solely is profits, and they consistently will promote ill health. They will promote addictive substances like fentanyl. They'll fight tooth and nail against Medicare for all because they're only in it for themselves. Talk about bad motives. And the person who I'm saying, oh, I don't think they're just bad motives. There's people there, they care about curing diseases. So I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do. Here, and if you have an idea, let me know. 240-363-7190. The emperor penguin, the world's largest, right? Again, we talked a little bit about them, that show Penguins. And I love animals. So if you're going to watch my program, if you watch my live stream, you will get stuck sometimes with these programs about animals. But I think it's so important. I think it's so important that we realize, we're not the only species on the planet, although we are clearly the most destructive. We're far from the only one. So let's see if I can get you this up a little bit bigger so you can read it. Actually, I guess you're okay with it the way it is. The emperor penguin is the world's largest, one of only two that can survive, endemic to, that live on Antarctica. And yeah, they give birth during the winter because then the mother is off swimming while the dad is hatching the eggs, and then she comes back with fish. For the two of them, and she only can find her chick and her husband. Well, her mate is not a husband. She only finds her mate because they can memorize each other's sounds. So he'll be calling to her, and then she'll come and feed him and her chick. Unfortunately, sometimes the female gets eaten by a leopard seal, or she can't find enough food for herself and she dies, and then it's really sad, and the poor dad is just crying away, and nobody shows. It's awful. He'll survive, but the chick won't. He may survive. He may also starve. He may be able to get to the ocean and go fishing. So so the situation is that the chick is born, and it's in winter, and the mom goes out and fishes, and she comes back and feeds them, and then the dad goes out and fishes, and he feeds them. But if the sea doesn't freeze sufficiently because of the global burning, then there's no place for the family to make its little nest, or if it melts, and then the chick or the egg falls into the ocean, and the chick dies because it's can't swim and its feathers aren't waterproof. They cannot survive in the water till their adolescence, says biologist Marcelo Libertelli. And so, is this impacting? So in the past 3 years, and this was in 2022, remember, so it's worse now. Because now we're seeing that plunge down in the plunge down in terms of surface ice level. So there's less and less ice now than there even was when we saw for 3 straight years the second largest emperor penguin colony, all the chicks died. So when that ice melts, egg or the chick falls into the sea, it dies. The dad or mom or whoever's got the chick with them can swim, so they don't die. They can fish, so they can eat. But the colony gets older and older. There's no replacement for the ones who die out from old age or for lack of food. We're extinguishing this species. It's that simple. Oh, all right. Why? And I also just want to respond to one other comment I've been seeing where people are, how you talk about we need a carbon tax, or we need, because this very problem, how do we solve it? So I'm isolated carbon tax, but, a lot of governments talk about regulations, and they, you have to farm in a different way. You have to farm in a more sustainable way. And people are complaining, or more regulations on business. You can't drive your car. You can't do this. You can't do that. And people say, I can't survive. I can't survive. And I have incredible sympathy for that. And we do, of course, need to have a guarantee that everyone has enough to eat, everyone has a place to live. That has to be part and parcel of solving the climate crisis. And there also has to be, obviously, in recognition that no one gets to get rich. You can get a little bit rich, but you can't get plutocratic rich. That's the only way we solve this. But we have to address it. We can't say, well, solutions will be too costly to poor, struggling, and working people, so therefore we can't solve it. No, we solve it by raising taxes on fossil fuels, and we guarantee everyone a decent life. And we have to elect people who will do that. The only person who's going to do that, Dr. West. Vote for Dr. West. That's simple. I told you I have not completely canceled Jimmy Dore. I really don't cancel people. Very rarely would I cancel somebody. Why? Why have I chosen not to cancel Jimmy Dore when he is in carrying water for the worst people on earth, the climate, the fossil fuel industry, the worst effing people on earth, the fossil fuel industry? Why would I not, under those circumstances, cancel Jimmy Dore? I should, right? I mean, it's really, really bad. But as bad as it is, as wrong-headed as immoral as it is, Jimmy does do still some good programs. And I learned from him. And here's something that I did not know that David Ignatius in the Washington Post had published. So let me play this for you.
Network, and guess what? So I'm reading the Washington Post, and this is an opinion piece. It says, the West feels gloomy about Ukraine. Here's why it shouldn't. You're not going to believe this. Maybe you will. Meanwhile, for the United States and its NATO allies, these 18 months of war have been a strategic windfall. That means a good thing. That means an amazing good thing for us. Wait. At relatively low cost, other than for the Ukrainians.
All right, so I watched that yesterday, and I guess it was a couple days ago. And I had to look into it because it really is sociopathic, right? What David Ignatius wrote, if he wrote it, that this has been a windfall. This has been a good thing, right? Except for what's happened to the Ukrainians. Okay, hundreds of thousands of casualties. Their land is basically rubble, much of it. Eastern Ukraine, much of it rubble. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty high cost. And it apparently doesn't really occur to David Ignatius if he said it. So I decided to investigate. Before I did, I just did want to do a quick little investigation into Ignatius because, if we're going to talk about him, we should know who he is. And I did want to, and I mean, I know pretty well because I don't always read the Washington Post. I didn't read that piece until I watched Jimmy. And here's a spoiler alert. Ignatius said exactly, he was quoted completely accurately by Dore. But here he is, and I was interested at Harvard College. It seems like that's where you go. Like, what a great gig to be a columnist. I mean, I've read a lot of columns. I'm like, man, why isn't my stuff why is my shit in the Washington Post? Every now and then it is. I mean, they have put a few little articles I've written, but I don't get a 2-day-a-week column to write a load of crap like that. I guess if you go to Harvard College and then look, he even has Cambridge. So there's your experts, there's your elites. I don't, Ivy League, man, pish tosh, it's meaningless to me. Meh. I don't. Yeah, there's some smart people there, sure. There's smart people everywhere. Are they on average a little smarter? Probably. But they're also probably a little bit more sociopathic, a little bit more self-righteous, a little bit more arrogant, a little more certain that they're right and everyone else is wrong. And you do see that in Ignatius, for sure. So here is just taken from that column. Let me just get this. And it's basically exactly what Jimmy said. It is not basically, it's exactly what Jimmy said, although I highlighted a slightly different part of it. I don't get how you could look at this horrible war and see it as anything but a complete tragedy. And it's just grinds on and on and on. So horrible. But apparently, and even if you don't focus on the loss of life, I don't know how you could see it as anything but a disaster. But Ignatius seems to think so. So he does say there's been a strategic windfall. So we've gotten something we didn't expect, right? It's like the windfall apples. That's what that means. A windfall is something that is kind of a bonus. And at relatively low cost, except for those hundreds of thousands of casualties, dead and seriously wounded Ukrainians. The land, basically we saw it, building cities leveled. Our most reckless antagonist has been rocked. Have they been? I don't know. They're down. They're in Africa right now, causing all kinds of trouble. Genocidal wars in Africa now, which Wagner is helping foment. So I don't. It's our ally that's being decimated. Our quote ally that's being decimated, Ukraine. NATO has grown much strong, not just a little stronger, but much stronger with the additions of Sweden and Finland. Not sure how that makes us much stronger, or NATO rather. I think it just, again, brings us closer to some kind of World War III. Germany has weaned itself from dependence on Russian energy. Well, if that's true, I will say that's a positive. I don't have any reason to believe that's true. I do know that the higher costs of energy have reduced demand in Europe, and that's a great thing. But I want to see them wean themselves from dependence on all fossil fuels. So if that's happening, okay, good. I'm not sure it has. In fact, what we're seeing now, of course, with the Biden approval of the pipelines, is that we're going to put more gas online, which is one of the top fuels used in Europe, and which was in that Nord Stream pipeline. I guess what he's saying is that's good that we blew up that Nord Stream pipeline and dumped all that methane into the atmosphere. And it's just rediscovered its sense of value. It's not sure what that means. But this has been a triumphal summer. I don't triumphal. I mean, it does require a remarkable suspension of disbelief. And I decided I want to go back and look at last thing. This is so absurd. Let's look at Ignatius's track record. Maybe he's gotten things right in the past, so we should be a little more, or I should be a little more deferential. I should be able to say, Ignatius has been smart. Ignatius got some things right, so I'm not going to make too much about him getting this so terribly, terribly wrong. And my main area where I really wanted to look, I really wanted to find out was what his view, how he handled the Iraq War. The Washington Post cheerled that war all the way. They were totally, the New York Times was worse, remember, because New York Times stovepiped Dick Cheney through their columnist, who's now, I can't remember her name. Was it Judith Miller? So they were really, really bad. But so was the Post. Ignatius in 2013, I give this guy a heck of a lot of credit. I remember reading this column when I read it. I owe readers an apology for being wrong on the overriding question of whether the war made sense. So he supported that war. He supported the Iraq War. So his track record on the most disastrous American foreign policy crime, I think it's the most disastrous crime, because what it created has been so destabilizing, so harmful. I don't know if it's the worst crime was attacking. I mean, what we did to Libya was really, really bad. Really bad. Maybe this is worse. I don't know. Does it? I mean, I guess you get to that point where you have to say, well, what's worse, slavery or the Holocaust? They're both so evil. It's hard to really choose between them. And I won't. I mean, I think certainly they're the two greatest evils that we, can look at in recent times. But this is just absolutely horrible, what we did to Iraq. And Ignatius supported at the time. But I give him a lot of credit. He apparently learned from that mistake, or at least he acknowledges it's a mistake. The problem is he's now cheerleading another war, another disastrous war, another war that is just creating carnage, wreckage, utter, just, I mean, the words fail, right? So here's the cost, right? He said, for us, it's been at low cost. Yes, a lot of Ukrainians are dead, dying, or harmed, hurt, families destroyed. Remember that picture? I don't have it here, of the woman, just the agony she was in when she saw her entire home destroyed by the bombing. Maybe she lost lives too. But if you want to put that aside, so $77 billion bilateral aid to Ukraine between, and I don't know, bilateral, we're just giving it to them. January 24, 2022, a little over a year, $77 billion. I think Dorr makes the point we could have ended homelessness in the United States, house every single American. We could certainly afford, I think that's about as much as the total cost of single-payer health care would be in this country. The cost of for-profit is more per year, is much more per year. But I'm pretty sure that would be enough to provide health care for every single American. And that doesn't even include all the savings that we all would accrue to all of us from having an end to the for-profit healthcare crisis. So $77 billion. And you can see some of the places it's gone. Humanitarian aid is a tiny fraction, 5%. Financial, because obviously this is a business decision, this war. Security assistance, military, and then you continue with more military aid. And I just want to see if I can get all of that in there. Weapons and equipment, let's see if you can see all of that. Yeah, weapons and equipment, 31%. So much, much more than half is for killing. And let's see, get the whole thing on the screen. Grants and loans, more weapons. Grants and loans for weapons and equipment. That's only 6% more than the aid for people, or than humanitarian aid, despite the fact this is a humanitarian crisis. And note also that these numbers coming from Anteza, whatever the heck that is, Ukraine Support Tracker, Kiel Institute for the World Economy. The chart only covers aid to Ukraine, does not include all U.S. spending related to the war. So I'm not sure where else we're spending money, but this is $79 billion through May is just part of the amount. And the great majority of that, again, on business and military weapons of mass destruction. And now the cluster bombs, they're not even part of this. All right, folks, sorry to be I don't want to say a Debbie Downer or a Hal Harper. I don't know, you harp on something.